This is really an update on where the NZN is at right now. And those on the call have, to a greater or lesser extent, been involved in the Net Zero Network up until now, and also into the recent work that we've been doing on climate literacy. So I'm going to explain, do a quick recap on a bit of the background, and then I'll explain where our latest thoughts and where we're going. And then I want your feedback on that. That's kind of the whole point of this, really, is to get feedback from you all about whether or not you think this is hitting a sweet spot and is heading in the right direction. Before I start, I'd like to, as usual, pay my respects to the Whadjuk people of the Noongar Nation, whose land I am talking to you from today, and I'm sure most of you are on as well. And I'd like to pay my respects to their elders, past, present, and emerging. So the Net Zero Network, a very brief recap. I'll just put the slide on. 1 second. Okay. So the group's been going for about 18 months now, and it was formed out of a desire for a few of us to figure out how we could do more about this generational challenge that we have of reducing emissions. And just by being on this call, I think it's probably pretty clear that you're headed in the same space as mine here. We formed a group which was both about meeting in person and online to share ideas about how we could make more difference, both in the work that we do and what we do in our personal lives as well. We settled on a format for our meetings which has 3 parts, which are familiar to anyone who's attended them before. So Inform is where we hear from inspiring keynote speakers in a particular area related to reducing emissions. Empower is a facilitated discussion ably led by Steve Barrett, who unfortunately can't be with us today, but normally joins us, a professional facilitator who really gets the energy up with us thinking about what we can do about what we just heard about in the keynote. And then Act is about how we can take our actions based on the discussion that we've had, and then how we can refer back to what we said we'd do before and check that we've done it. Really great format for meetings. Some of the best discussions I think I've ever had in a group about how to solve problems have come up in those meetings. So Inform and Empower were going really, really well, but we were falling down on Act. As a group, we didn't feel like we were making enough progress, and we wanted to think about how we could improve our ability to have impact on reducing emissions as a group. So after running about 8 months of in-person meetings, we decided to take a bit of a pause and think about how we could improve in the ACT component. That led to us selecting a particular focused theme to work on. And we felt that improving climate literacy in WA was the theme where we could have most impact, and something that lots of us were passionate about as well. So in thinking about that question of climate literacy, I started thinking back to the first time that I'd really thought about the education of people broadly on climate-related issues, the challenges, and then the opportunities which the solutions present. And it took me back to when I took this picture back in 2019 in Denmark. So this wasn't Denmark in WA, this was Denmark in Europe. I was in Denmark for a conference which I was attending, which I was presenting at the time I worked in the maritime industry, and I was presenting on exciting new technologies to make high-speed ferries more efficient. And I just stumbled across this demonstration as I was walking down the street. What shocked me about this was that this was young people, their parents, older people, just the general public who were all coming out en masse to demonstrate about the need for the government to take climate action. And it was the moment which pushed my awareness of other people's concerns of climate right up from something which was, maybe in the top 10 of a number of different issues being talked about, to something which was clearly forefront of a lot of people's minds. So climate literacy in places like Denmark and other places in Europe is probably an awful lot higher than in somewhere like Western Australia. And of course, since 2019, when this picture was taken, plenty of things have happened. So this building awareness of the importance of climate has really become a tsunami. And we see now international leaders like Antonio Guterres, the UN Secretary General, making statements like this, making peace with nature as a defining task of the 21st century. He also called this current moment code red for humanity when it comes to our actions on climate. So at the top of the global power structures, people are now talking about climate change issue, which we have to address. And why are we talking about this? Well, of course, it's fundamentally an energy imbalance for the Earth's atmosphere. We've got more energy coming in now than can get out due to the increasing concentration of atmospheric CO2 in the atmosphere. And that leads to an average temperature rise, but it also leads to all sorts of negative climate impacts, changes in our weather systems, which we're already starting to experience. And if we project forwards, we can see that we're going to see much higher increases in temperature above pre-industrial levels, and much more significant impacts in terms of adverse weather events. So what bothers me about this as an engineer is this is just an unsustainable system in the truest sense of the word. We cannot carry on like this forever. We need to find a way to do something different. If you've read the latest DNV Energy Transition Outlook, which I posted a link to in the LinkedIn group about a week ago, that states that at the moment, the forecast is that we're going to hit a 2.2 degree temperature rise by the year 2100, which will not be a particularly pleasant place for our children, grandchildren, and their children to be. So we need to work hard to counter that. The work is not yet done. But there is good progress underway. Joe Biden, after COP26 in July this year, was able to pass the Inflation Reduction Act in the US, which is the world's largest ever government package of climate action. Depending on how you project what their expenditures are going to be, it'll be somewhere between 3 and 600 billion US dollars, which will be spent to tackle climate change. And that's going to be absolutely transformative in so many different ways in the US. Just to give one example from an industry that I'm now familiar with, the production of renewable hydrogen, there's up to $3 per kilogram of hydrogen subsidy tax credit now on offer under the Inflation Reduction Act. Now, those figures may not mean much if you're in the hydrogen industry, but it basically means that renewable hydrogen pretty soon could be on par with fossil fuels in some circumstances in terms of the cost per unit of energy. So these are huge steps forward which are being taken in the US and which will have ripples globally. What about us in Western Australia? Well, our emissions in Western Australia are certainly nothing to be particularly proud of, particularly on a per person basis. In fact, if you look at this World Bank data from 2019, we are the second worst emitter in the entire world if we were a separate country, and some people would like us to be in WA. We would have emissions just behind Qatar and in front of Bahrain and Kuwait. I looked at the figures for 2020, they weren't quite so dramatic. I think we shift down a few places, but we're still definitely in the top 5. What do these places have in common? Generally, they are countries with significant oil and gas industries and small populations. That's a big driver of emissions and not many people to divide those across. WA also has many high emitting industries as well. Mineral processing is one example. So for us to go to being a leader in the drive towards net zero, we've got a long way to go if we want to move down this ranking. But there is change afoot in WA as elsewhere. The federal election in 2019 saw a decent swathe of Liberal blue across the Perth metro area. Fast forward to 2022 and the electorates have been turned red in the south of the river, but also we've had the election of Kate Cheney into the electoral seat of Curtin. And Kate Cheney, as I'm sure most of you know, ran on a ticket of action on climate change, on women's rights, and on driving out corruption out of the political system. So the voters within Curtin were voting on all 3 of those issues, but clearly climate was something which was very close to the top of their agenda when they were making their decisions. An interesting other parallel, if you look at the electorate of Curtin, I was looking recently at the statistics for home batteries per person by WA postcode, because that's the kind of thing that I like to do. And the 2 postcodes which have the highest number of home batteries per person are within Curtin. So I found that an interesting correlation, because the people who were the first within the state to vote for in a federal election for a climate-focused politician were also the people who were spending money to install home batteries, which would capture the solar power from their roofs and then store it for use later on. Arguably quite a green way to spend your money. And the picture on the right is an electrician who's actually installing a home battery, which I installed in my house. So I'm one of these people. Now, of course, the electorate of Curtin is in many ways the stereotypical climate conscious electorate. It's wealthy, it's inner city. And action in somewhere like Curtin isn't necessarily what's going to move the dial on reducing emissions. We can see that the actions of people in Curtin on how they vote, the technology choices they make, the behaviour changes that they make, how they invest their money, all of that will be at the far left of this diagram. So we could charitably call these people innovators and early adopters. It's the early majority and the late majority that we need to get to if we're going to have real impact. And then, of course, that needs to be scaled geographically, not just from Perth, but to the rest of West Australia, or more globally. What we need to look for are ways in which we can go from pathways which the innovators and early adopters create to action in the majority space. So if we look at another statistic, we can see another example of this. Solar installs per person rather than batteries per person. If we look at the heat map of that in the same area, we see that the data is almost completely reversed. We now see way more solar installs per person in the outer suburbs, the new suburbs, than we do in Curtin. That talks to the reason that people install solar panels on their home. So it's not an indulgent decision, which is what I would describe installing a home battery as someone who's done it himself. Instead, it's a rational economic decision. If you install solar panels on your average house, depending on the orientation of your roof, your payback period will probably be under 5 years. So particularly if you're building a new house and you already have your regular electrician in, it just makes a lot of sense to do it. So clearly you're speaking to people's heads there, and as a result, they're making a climate conscious decision. But people also make climate conscious choices based on their heart as well, on what gets them going emotionally and motivates them towards a particular course of action. And I can give an example of this from my own life, not related to something directly related to climate action, but actually related to my first professional career as a naval architect. When I graduated in naval architecture back in 2005, I really, really wanted to be involved in the design of big ships. And I don't really know where that passion came from. I think it must have been playing with Lego as a child or something. But I was fascinated by the challenge of being involved in a project which would go from just lines on a drawing board through to an actual ship at sea. And I was driven to find the way in which I could achieve that. So I was really excited when the first project I got to work on was this, the UK's new aircraft carrier. I designed these longitudinal steel bulkheads which run the full length of the aircraft carrier, which will never be seen by anyone outside it, but I know that they're in there and they're very important to the structural integrity of the vessel. And then fast forward from 2006 to 2017, and that ship was built and launched and delivered to the Royal Navy. So that gave me an enormous sense of satisfaction. It was something that wasn't driven, it wasn't economically rational that I wanted to choose that career. It's because I wanted to do this thing, because I wanted to see this thing built. And I find the same thing now when I'm getting involved in the early stage of projects which are going to really transform the production of energy in WA. So for example, the Asian Renewable Energy Hub, which many of you will be familiar with, if it goes ahead and reaches its full implementation, it would be something like 26 gigawatts of installed solar and wind capacity up in the Pilbara, exporting renewable energy as hydrogen, which is then used to create ammonia, which is sent off to Japan, Korea, other places all around the world. And I get really excited about the chance to be involved in projects like this, and there are plenty of them on the drawing board at the moment. And then perhaps in 20 years' time, being able to post a picture of standing next to these projects when they're actually built. So that's what motivates me, and that's what gets me going. But that's my emotional reason to get involved in the energy transition, one among many. It's not necessarily the same for everyone. I could think about other people I know, and I picked an example here of someone I know who's quite different to me, who are probably motivated by very, very different things. This is a friend of mine who I'm going to call Brad, not his real name, but to protect the innocent. Brad, born and bred in Southwest Australia. This is a picture of him having a beer after he comes back from a hard day's fishing. He loves footy, cricket, all those kind of sports which I'm bad at and he's good at, and he loves going out fishing on his boat. Doing a bit of Facebook stalking of Brad and looking into the groups that he's interested in, they reflect those sorts of interests which I've just described. So local cricket club, artificial surf lake is in there, he's a great surfer, Jared's tinny mod. And the things which make me sit up and listen when it comes to really appreciating the need for climate action and getting excited about what I could do about it will be quite different to how that applies to Brad. So he might glaze over. In fact, I think he already does. If I talk to him at a barbecue about all these new mega projects in the Pilbara, but he may pay attention if I start talking to him about how there is a threat to his favorite fishing grounds from changes in the ocean as a result of climate change. And he may be interested in the possibility of buying a new boat which is electric powered, not powered by petrol or diesel, which has higher performance or is built of green aluminium. So you need to find the right language to reach different community groups to explain to them why it's such a problem that climate change is happening and what the opportunities are which are presented by this change in our economy which is required to meet the challenges of climate change. We're all part of different networks, and I founded the Net Zero Network because I like being connected to lots of different people and I like working through problems by talking to people. But that's just one of the networks that I'm a part of. I've also got my social network, just described that. And I've got the network of people that I work with at KBR. And I'm still a member of the Royal Institute of Naval Architects as well. I can't let go of that either. This is another network that I'm connected to. My sons are members of the local footy club, the Mount Hawthorn Cardinals. Sometimes I go along to some of their social events. And I last year was treasurer of Windsurfing Western Australia. All of these different groups will have different things which appeal to them and which will make them want to take action on climate change. And we can't assume that what appeals to us in our bubble in the bottom right is what appeals to all the other groups as well. So for example, as a windsurfer and a member of Windsurfing WA, one of the things that I would worry about most is whether or not changes to the climate are actually going to kill the sea breeze, which 4 months a year I go windsurfing on every single weekend. If you spoke to a bunch of windsurfers about that, they might pay attention pretty quickly. And then they would be interested in solutions to help them get all of their kit to their favorite windsurfing spot, which they clearly can't do with a new Tesla. So what are they going to do about that? What can they get involved in to support their passions and interests and those of others who have got similar passions and interests? And once we are able to connect with people in those networks, well, then they can reach out to other networks as well. And so you get this leverage effect where lots of different connections are made and we are able to spread the message much more broadly from just our small community that we have at the moment. So the core of what the NZN is about remains about spreading information, empowering people, and then helping them act. But we want to think about how we can break out from our existing bubble and provide that information more broadly. So we're still keen on having the in-person meetups, and in a minute I'm going to explain a little bit more about what the next meetup will be. We think that's a great way to get people together, to get people talking. It's always really good fun, it's really energizing. But we also want to think about what resources that we can provide people to take away from those meetups if they've attended one, and then reach out to the other networks that we have. So one of the steps that we need to put in place is we need to put in place a website, and we're working on that at the moment. If you go to netzeronetwork.org, you'll see the latest iteration, very much still a work in progress. That will be a website which will provide information on our upcoming talks and videos of our previous talks. But we also want it to be richer than that. We want it to become this online repository, this library for information that people can go to and which they can then take away to use and remix as they see fit in their own discussions with their own networks. Now, as Isis, who's on the call, who's been working with me on this page, is keen to point out, all this information which I've shown here, which I'd be more than happy to throw onto this website and let people use as they see fit, is really geeky engineering information, because I'm a geeky engineer and this is what appeals to me. What we need to do is take information from all of our speakers, from anyone who wants to contribute, and then put that information up in a way which is easily accessible so that people can get the core messages which they need to take away and then tailor for their own audiences. But I think if we get this right, we could become a really powerful resource for WA-specific climate information, which can help spread that climate literacy throughout the state. So the key message that I want to leave you with is that the NZN has been a fantastic organisation for inspiring a bunch of innovators and early adopters. What we need to do now is find a way to spread our messages more broadly so that we can reach out to the majority of people, because that's how we will actually have substantial impact on reducing emissions. And this is the point actually where I would like to open this to the floor and get a bit of feedback on what you've heard. Do you have any questions on what you would like to clarify? Or do you think there is some feedback you'd like to give on the path that we're talking about here? And I'm just going to check the chat as well, because I see that there is. Great. We've got some discussions there already. Anyone want to come off mute and chip in?
I will, if I may. If not, this is going to go. Hi, everyone. I'm Alex Mornier. Max, it's great to see that. Yeah, I haven't seen what you guys have done for a few weeks, and Alan and the others. This is great, actually. And we did always talk about this, you know. And the thing that really resonates with me to having a repository is, you know, we all find ourselves in conversations with people. You know, and the typical one is, oh, but you know, an EV that runs on coal-powered grid is worse than a petrol car, and I'm not going to buy one. And, you know, all those kind of conversations you have. And, you know, for my part, I know that, I've read an article which, you know, went through the life cycle carbon impact of those two things, and, you know, it's had loads of data in it. But for the life of me, I couldn't find it, and I couldn't tell the person I'm talking to where to go and look for it. So if we had, you know, some really handy information, maybe even start with those typical myths and the conversations that you end up having multiple times with people. So you can literally just go straight to it and go, oh, yeah, you know, a good conversation about it, and go and look, here's some information that I think you might be interested in. That'd be really, really useful, because I always find the fact that I can't back up what I'm saying because I don't know where it came from, and I'm very bad at remembering exactly where it came from. So yeah, that'd be awesome. And then there's all kinds of other things we can do, I think, because, you know, information and knowledge is power, and the more easily that can be accessible, the better, really, to help all those conversations.
Yeah, cheers, Alex. And I think we shouldn't try and do everything here, because there's some fantastic work already happening in this space. You might have missed the brief at the beginning, but Doug was explaining what the Carbon Almanac project is and what that's doing, which is very much providing that global single point of truth, a really well-referenced document, which we can't necessarily or shouldn't necessarily hope to recreate. But what we can do is put that in a WA context.
Absolutely, yeah.
And then if people pick that up for their network, which is in WA, and they give it, you know, the particular context will be relevant to their footy club or whatever, then hopefully that's relevant enough that it will make people sit up and listen.
Yeah.
Great, thanks. Anyone else got any anything they want to chip in? Just going back to the comments.
I just put a link in there, actually. Someone mentioned the other day that Ford's bringing out EV utes that I just looked at the website, and I want one. It looks pretty awesome. That's quite a good way to start a conversation, because that looks like a pretty cool vehicle. So yeah, when we can start having conversations like that, and actually those are in the market, then that's a bit of a game changer, I reckon.
It is. The problem we've got is that they won't be coming here anytime soon. I think we're sort of,
yeah,
sounds like we're 3 or 4 years away from getting any leased in Australia, because it's such a small market, and obviously our policies haven't really supported that kind of thing until hopefully soon they're changing. But
yeah, we are getting a ute. It's landing in November, because I know that Transgrid in New South Wales have ordered half a dozen, and it's a Chinese company. I'll have to find the link for it, but it looks pretty good, and this ute has been in New Zealand for about 3 months.
Yeah, I've heard about that.
Yeah,
they got like hotcakes when they arrived there, I think, weren't they?
Yeah, they did. So apparently it's got a 350k range, not towing, and if it's towing full, like a full load maximum, that range goes down to about 150k's. So that's pretty good going for a ute, particularly given that utes most of the time, to be honest, are just scooting around from job site to job site in a reasonably small area. So that is going to be the game changer for for EV take up.
Yeah, for tradies especially, it's so good for tradies. That's right. Yeah, because they can run all their power tools off it and all the rest of it, and yeah.
That's right. And tradies are usually they change over their cars almost as regularly as government fleets, right? So they tend to change their cars over once every 3 years, which is, I've had my car for 7 years now. But so there will be a significant change in attitude, and it will only happen once we see a few of these utes on the road here in WA. So look for those in the new year, because I think we'll see them in Perth then. And once that seal is broken, we'll find, utes like the Ford Lightning ute, which is a bit of a monster ute, I must say. But that, we'll find some of those finally starting to come to Australia. But the Chinese at the moment are the only ones who are prepared to do right-hand drive utes because of the market scale. So, yeah, it's really interesting. And look, the other conversation that I've been having, so in my business referral group that I go to weekly, that's basically all SME, sort of SME businesses. Really interesting conversation. So a Tesla is absolutely a status symbol, and nobody's buying it because they want to save the planet. They're buying it because they want everybody to know that they can afford to spend 150 grand on a car. All right. The problem is that the Tesla is useless when it comes to actually providing all of the possible energy options that you can get, because the Tesla is a one-way battery. So it will only take in charge. It won't discharge other than via driving, right? So you can't plug it in at home and use, an amount that's left in your battery to support your, your evening peak when your solar's not running. So actually there's potentially, and this is hard to do because we don't want to get stung by Tesla for saying that Tesla's a shit, but because, Elon Musk is pretty litigious, but you do want to talk about why there are other better options that exist, because it'll help you save more money because you can use it in your house. And once that takes hold, I don't think we'll see a lot of the market for home batteries actually in existence. I think that this is that jumping game changer, technology game changer, that will take up most or soak up most of the home battery market.
Yeah, there's a huge amount of families, ours not is the same, that have a ute and a small car. The ute doesn't really go anywhere. It's for towing the caravan. Our ute's parked outside our house most of the time, apart from on weekends, or we do things with it. It could be a perfect home battery, absolutely. Once there's a vehicle to grid ute, you know, but it'd be there most of the time, and yeah, absolutely. And you'd be getting a battery 5 times the size for not 5 times the cost as well. So
that's exactly right. Or a battery that
or,
has,
or it'd be the same cost, but you get a free car, basically. You know?
That's exactly right.
Yeah.
Well, not quite the same cost. I mean, the battery that I've got in my house and my garage would not have been as much as a ute.
No, I mean, if you scale out, because it's probably 10 kilowatts, the ute might have a 70 kilowatt battery. Yeah, and it might be 70 grand, but so your price per kilowatt may actually be similar. And you end up getting a free car with it, effectively.
Yeah. And that's the sort of thing that, so when I talk about this to people inside of this, you know, so this is one of my networks that is completely not energy or carbon related, they're all shocked, absolutely shocked when I tell them that no, I wouldn't necessarily buy a Tesla until they think about changing the way in which they're operating. And people say to me, oh, but, you know, Elon Musk. And I say things like, well, what you've got to realize is that Elon Musk has a business installing batteries in people's garages. Do you think that he doesn't want you to buy a battery for your house and a car? All right, he's just eating his own lunch if he makes his cars two-way charge. And they're like, oh. So, you know, and I can just see Kate has popped up a chat. But yeah, some of these Mythbuster type resources that are topical and current might actually be quite useful.
So, and I just read.
Yeah. So just building on. Oh, sorry.
No, go ahead.
No, I was just going to build on Liz's point and also what you said at the start. So I think the empower and act part of the NZN, we spend a lot of time, I think focusing on inform, but I think moving to empower and act is where the evolution of this goes, where it becomes very powerful. Just like you were saying there, Liz, about myth busting Tesla, and even thinking about how Tesla has worked with the South Australian government, where they're actually creating value. It's not by supplying that surplus demand, it's by actually regulating the frequency of the power. So some of those little factoids are very powerful. And I'm seeing it, I'm in aviation, and in my world, I'm seeing the same thing with the take-up of electric aircraft.
Yeah.
And just in the conversation with the people that are pioneering that, there's huge parallels to other industries. And I think back to the start of the networking, Max, that was part of it, wasn't it? Trying to share stories and lessons from one industry that could be perhaps it's advanced or behind other industries, but sharing those lessons. And in the aviation space, what's really come out of that is it's not actually designing the electric aircraft that was a breakthrough. It was the fast charging battery that came out of it. That technology is now being scaled massively through the US. So I think the empower part and the act part is, yeah, as the network grows, that can be enormously powerful to help actually drive and move the needle.
Yeah, I agree. And I think the way that you avoid getting sued by Elon Musk is that you make this all fact-based.
Yeah.
So you present information, it's clearly referenced, because as soon as there's even a slither of doubt about a piece of information that you present or where it's come from or the veracity of it or that it's got some bias to it, someone will find a way to shoot it down. Yeah. So what I've always been keen on in my presentations is being really explicit about what the source of the information is. And I think that we really need that discipline so that it's not subjective. It's the same with the carbon almanac, it's the same, like you've got really clear referencing which you can point back to. Kate, I see you're going, I don't know if you can still hear me, but your contribution was much appreciated in the chat, and I did want to get that actually done already. But the point that that Kate was making, yeah, and Nikki, you're agreeing as well, is definitely the right one, right? We've got to figure out how do we have the most impact, which is what the NZN is all about. And how do we provide the information which makes people figure out what is the right way to have the most impact? I heard a good, I think it was a podcast recently, where the speaker was making the point that a lot of people do actually get there's a need for climate action, but the problem most people face is the very reason that we get together, which is they don't know how to have agency. They don't know how to act on it. And so what we're really trying to think about here is how do we pull that information together.
I think part of the challenge. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Nikki.
That's okay. So I'm actually really excited to be telling you all. One of the reasons I haven't been to any of the Net Zero Network events is just I've been inundated with work, and one of them is putting together a training program on carbon literacy, which is accredited by the Carbon Literacy Project in the UK. And I started delivering it this week to the Department of Water and Environmental Regulation. Now, they're kind of a they're an audience that already are doing a lot of work in there, being the custodians of the WA climate policy, but they are also great advocates for the program and more action within WA. And I think really the more we can advertise the kind of things that are happening, the policies that are out there, hearing today on the news about Woodside sort of being slammed for backing the dockers, that kind of information needs to be further sent out. And if the NZN website can be like a repository for what is happening and who is doing what, I think it can be a great source for all of us and then other people to consult and then bring people back to and share that information through. There's so many great people talking about different things, books, I'm very excited to have a look at your carbon, the almanac that Doug, you've been working on. But I think we do need to keep coming back to where is some information and be able to find it easily, because the World Wide Web is a very, very wide web and trying to find the information can be very difficult.
And I think that whilst the web is an amazing resource, and we were talking here about putting things onto the website so people can access it, it's only part of the solution, isn't it? Just because it is so massive and vast and so full of crap as well as good stuff. So it's also about us taking that information and pointing people towards it or presenting to people in our network. So there is there's some work for us to do as individuals to leverage the resources that we can bring together in one place.
I think there is still a latent issue. I had a meeting earlier this week with the guy who's heading up part of the Liberal Party of WA's energy policy development. And I was talking to him about microgrids and why the Western Power SPS systems are shit, and how much diesel they're burning. And yet, Bill Johnston is claiming that these things are, some sort of renewable energy panacea for Western Australia. And I was sort of saying, look, there's two fronts that the WA Liberal Party should be thinking about addressing this. There is just a straight up Bill Johnston lies, but then there's also the broader issue, which is, actually Western Power is creating a more immediate climate problem than the one that they're trying to address. And he very quickly shut down any discussion about climate, right? He just said straight off the bat, no Liberal Party member is interested in being, and he used the words, preached to about woke lefty climate issues. Right now, this is from someone, he's a nice guy, but he's a pleasant enough person. And I certainly didn't raise this as being an aggressively, militant climate thing. I just sort of said, well, look, there's two things that you can do with this. And he almost jumped down my throat about it. So I'm just a little bit wary of us pushing things out. Like the balance between the push and then people searching for information. I'm not sure where that needs to land, but it is.
Yeah, I think it's a good point. I mean, I guess you want, well, when we land on this in your question, we'll get to that in a second. When I think about the goal here, I think about how great would it be if, he had heard not just from you about that issue, but actually he had had 5 other conversations over the last week where people were expressing concern about climate and about some particular action which was taken. Then he might get it, and he might actually think, maybe actually Liberal voters do care about this. So we're a apolitical organisation. We're not trying to advocate for a particular political thing.
No, but I was just using him as this week's example of, some people get very thingy.
Yeah, but they're reflecting the sort of the general cultural mood amongst the people they talk to and are aware of and they're trying to please. And we're trying to, it's not easy, but we're trying to sort of provide tools to move that whole thing along. One
thought that I did have, and maybe those people in the room with teenage children can help, but you know, for most of, certainly for me, I never got to learn anything about climate change at school, high school or primary school, right? So I wouldn't even know what is currently being taught as part of WA's curriculum. Is there any way we can get our hands on some of that curriculum and post some of that up on a website with some sort of like, this is 101 that your kids are learning, here's 102 or 201, whatever you want to call it, which is a bit of an expansion of what your children are thinking right now or being taught right now. Now, I can't get that, but it's just might be something that would be quite WA specific and would help middle-aged people, you know, basically, or people with, not even middle-aged actually, people with even primary school kids are getting education in climate-related issues. I wouldn't even know what they're learning.
Yeah.
I'm pretty, with my teenagers, that they learn everything about it from me. It's not specifically part of the curriculum. Some schools have individual projects or events that they might run ad hoc, but it's not organised or standardised in a curriculum.
Really?
No. Well, most private schools are part of the whole school curriculum. No, meaning the national curriculum as well. And they have the bits. Depends what year they're in and whether they're going to do ATAR subjects, etc. It's all broken down into those sections. But from what I understand, it's not specific about sustainability areas yet. It may drill down into recycling and other areas, but from what I can see, it's not any more specific than that.
Yeah.
But correct me if I'm wrong.
Yeah, look, I'd like to say that there is definitely a move towards embedding the 17 goals into the curriculum at all levels. It's not maybe as fast as it needs to be. I know I work at ECU and we're now increasingly looking at how to embed the goals. Now, I do work in a business school, so it's kind of interesting. It tends to be much more about the ethics and the societies, the societal impact more so than the environment. But there is a link to it. There are links to it, and I do see it being implemented in my kids' schools. Again, not as heavily as it could be, and maybe should be. But it is, the movement is there, and the media is full of news. Sadly, there's a lot more news about what isn't working than what is working, which is sometimes the negativity is also an issue. I mean, there is the climate fatigue and there's a lot of mental health issues that need to be considered as well when we talk about the future. So bringing people on board is really important. As Max, you were saying in the beginning of your talk, is really, you know, it's about finding the common ground to try and get people on board to listen, because if you turn them off, then you've sort of lost that discussion point altogether.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. And to answer your question, Amanda, about who is the target audience, that's a really difficult one. Like, I don't know even I have a good answer for that, because I don't think when we founded it, it was just about connecting with other people who were in this situation where they knew it was a problem and they wanted to have more agency. And now, as we think about how we can have agency and create impact, we want to roll out to a broader group. But what that next layer of the onion, which we're trying to access, looks like, I think there's probably work to be done there. Isis, you're probably smiling because you said exactly the same thing to me when I said I'd really like this page of resources. Can you come up with some ideas for it?
There does seem to be, like Sharkers online, I see that people that have interests that would like to connect and build a stronger base
Yeah.
And there are other groups that I've talked with over the year, whatever, that have got different agendas, like whether they're advocacy agendas, whether they're based in Margaret River and they're dealing with a specific group and they're just recycling tyres in a certain thing, but they still want to be part of a bigger collective. So whether, we seem a little bit more academic, which is great because everyone's sort of at different stages of the process. So whether that's a platform for everyone to be considered, that's why I put that out there. We all have sort of similar visions and missions and goals, just at different parts of the pie, whatever.
And so I guess the thinking was to try and always dodge that question was just to create a core of information that then people can tailor. But you do have to get that person to want to tailor it in the first place. So yeah, that's
perhaps some sort of, I don't want to say procedure because that sounds very formal, but it does put things in a certain space where they can be understood and easily shared and developed.
Yeah.
Or trimmed back, whichever works.
Yeah.
For the cause.
Well, I'm glad anyway that we're having a good discussion just as we do in person online. Really enjoyed sharing everyone's thoughts. Just before I move on to talk about what the next meeting is going to be, does anyone else have any particular thoughts on this whole strategy or the information that we intend to put on the website or anything else that you want to get off your chest?
Max, anything I'd say is just the conversation around like what's being taught in schools and how information often comes from a sector view or industry view where it's got a tint or an angle to it. I think one of the big powers the NZN has is it's like a single source of truth. I think the more we can be positioned as being, apolitical, here's the facts, here's an unvarnished sense that even some of the things you put up tonight, I think that's really powerful because my experience of my teenage daughter at school is there's a huge demand for a huge amount of appetite, but what's missing is the science. They see the output, they see this needs to change, but there's not really a conversation on the science of it, and there's an appetite for that. I think it's the same in industry. Industry will have a focus on a particular issue, but it's sort of biased or prejudiced by the industry or what they're trying to achieve. So I think single source of truth, being a respected portal where you're putting forward the facts, I think that's a really powerful position, and you can't kind of go wrong with that. People may disagree. They might find it, the conversation around Tesla and so forth, they might evoke some reactions, but it's the truth, right? And I think that's a really powerful position to hold. And I think that's how we separate ourselves from the huge amount of information and data and daily podcasts that are out there. I think that, unvarnished truth is a strong position to be.
Okay. Yeah. Great. Thank you, Alan. Lots of thumbs up to that. Okay. You reminded me actually, because we were talking about other groups as well, just to give a quick update on this constellation of groups called WA Plus, which I've mentioned to various people in various other meetings. These are all groups who are fundamentally interested in sustainability and in creating a prosperous, economic, diversified future for WA. I've been participating, as has Alan and Steve, in various discussions with WA Plus. It looks like they're actually going to have an event to launch as an organisation sometime in November. So there'll probably be more information coming out of it soon. What's interesting from my point of view is it's another network for us to connect with, and potentially quite a large network of other groups. So I think it all adds weight to the argument that ISIS, we need to create that information repository. and there's so many hands at the wheel here who can help with information, and lots of great stuff which has already been done with organisations like the Carbon Almanac as well, which we can look to turn to as well. We just need to figure out what our focus is.
And presumably, like, there'll be a mixture of, we could link to loads of really good websites, like Green Vehicle Guide, for example, so that's quite a low-hanging fruit. It's quite easy. We can create sort of catalogues of all these good places, and then presumably there'll be some more curated information where it's like a specific article or a specific thing in topics and things, and kind of different ways of organising that, isn't there? Because that needs a bit more effort, because you've got to think about what it is and what the messaging is. But it's be very quick to start with a list of websites, podcasts, all those kind of resources, just all in one place. Yeah. A bit like that we all might do with our favourites bar, and like keep all this stuff where we can kind of obviously do a much better job if everyone got their heads together to get all that information in one place.
Yeah, and I think we don't aim for perfection either. Like, we just need to, get some. The important point is it's information which we can back up. So we're confident. I want to be like 99% confident in the referencing for it, or 99.9% of where the data comes from, but only 80% confident that it's the right data for our audience. Just get it up on the website, and we'll see what works and what doesn't, and over time we probably measure where people are hitting the website from, and all those sorts of things. Great. Okay. Let me just share screen again, and I will just take us back to the final slide, which is talking about what we've got upcoming next. Okay, you got that one? So we have been talking amongst ourselves, the group who have been working together on climate literacy, about what our next focus area for our meeting should be. And we've decided to focus on money, because money talks, money grabs people's attention. And we want to run a series of meetings which build progressively on this theme at the individual, the community, and then the state level. So the first meeting will be at the individual level. How can we use our own financial power in how we consume, how we invest and save? How can we use our financial power to reduce emissions? And then John Ryan from Capital Partners has kindly agreed to talk to us on that subject. That's on the 23rd of November at our normal home in UWA. So I'll be putting up a meetup group on that, a meetup event, sorry, for that over the next few days. And then we'll come back after Christmas and we'll hear from Josh Hopkins from Open Corridor, talking about how we can visualize the impact of our finances at the community level, and how that means that we can take action as individuals within our community to reduce emissions. And then part 3, which is the one I'm particularly interested in, is looking at the state level. Like, what is the link between emissions and between finances at the state level? And I've already published a bit of information on that, but I think there's an exciting area to drill into there more, so that we can then think about what are the levers that the state can pull and how can we influence those to reduce emissions. I have an idea for who I'd like to speak for that part 3, but I haven't yet bent their arms sufficiently to get them to speak, so more news to follow on that soon. Good. Unless anyone else has anything to raise, then I will close it at this point. Slightly disappointed that we can't go to the pub like we normally do, but that will get into the next time.
Max, I don't know if anyone's seen the post. There's I'm joining a bunch of people. I've been invited to talk to at the 17X event here in Perth. It's 17X is sort of like a TEDx, but around the 17 goals, and it's about bringing together people doing things in the sustainability space for businesses. Is it okay if I post that on the Net Zero Network LinkedIn page as a, I mean, if you are interested and available, it's just bringing together sustainable thoughts. And one of those areas is also looking at how we are looking at sustainability in the curriculum at ECU. I'm one of the speakers. I'm talking together with another one of my colleagues, and we are looking at how around basically quality education around towards sustainability. It's not only about net zero, but it's also about net zero more generally. So shall I put that on the LinkedIn page, or should I put it in the chat here?
No, much better to put it on the LinkedIn page, much broader audience for it.
Okay.
I did not have any admin controls on the LinkedIn page, so anyone can post anything. And the only thing is if someone obviously consistently posts commercial spam, which we've had a couple of times, right, about the group, but like, we've had that like once from some random, probably a bot social marketer. In general, I want my personal view, and I think others are the same, are just use that group as a fantastic way to connect with the community and share ideas, meetings, resources, whatever it is.
Okay, I'll put that in there. It is next weekend. It's next week on Wednesday, so a week from today. If you are available, join in. There is also, you can join in online or come in person. It's a good opportunity.
ECU?
No, it's in the city. It's at the Small Business Development Corporation's venue.
Good. I look forward to learning more about that then.
Wonderful.
Okay, well, if no one has anything else, let me just say thank you very much for giving up your time on a Wednesday evening. Always appreciated, and I love having these discussions. It gets me excited every time about where we're going to go with this next.
Awesome.
Yep,
Thank you,
that
Max.
was great. Thank you, Max. Thanks, everybody.
Thanks, Max. Thanks all.
Well done.
Nice to be back.
Yeah.